It is my privilege to introduce to all of you, Dr. Ravi Vijayaraghavan. Welcome, Ravi. If we can now turn on your video and say hi so that we know that you're there and we can hear you.
Hello, everybody. Hope you can see me. I can't see my own. Yeah, let me try to figure this out.
You can. Yeah, okay. We can see you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
Thanks for joining again. Folks, again, it's my privilege to invite Ravi here. He is, if you're not familiar with Ravi, he is nominated, for 4 times the 10 most influential analytics leader in this country, right? For 4 times consecutively. He's also Vice President and Head of Analytics and Decision Sciences Organization of a company I'm not sure if many of you have heard, but it's called Flipkart. Right? Flipkart, of course, is a household name. So because I'm introducing and Ravi is, joined us, let's keep the questions related to data analytics and how it is used in the organizations as opposed to where is my package, right? So please keep the conversations to the context, and I'm sure, we will get more insights from him, and there are better ways to get your problem solved. So, Ravi essentially leads this analytics practice and organization, helping Flipkart making decisions both from a strategic business decisions as well as the ones that impact, customers and consumer experience as well, right? Before that, Ravi was a chief data scientist, and he was also a global head of analytics for 24/7 AI. I'm sure many of you have heard of that company. It is in the area of customer engagement and customer service. Great products there. So Ravi holds a PhD from University of Wisconsin at Madison, and also an MBA from Ross School of Business, right? All Ivy League schools here. And what is, I can't miss this one. Ravi is a recipient of Henry Ford Technology Award. He worked at Ford as well, and that is the highest technical recognition given at Ford. So, and of course, you can't have a data analytics leader without having a number of patents. So he holds about 25 plus patents in these areas. So it's an honor, Ravi. Thank you. And welcome to the Product Leadership Festival, day 4 of this. And please start with your, talk and presentation. And after that, I will be monitoring the questions and I'll pick the relevant ones. We'll also ask some polls just to get some insights from, about the audience and what they think about few things, but I'd let you get started right away.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you very much. And really appreciate your invitation to come and give a talk here. Thank you, everybody, and for making the time this late in the evening to listen to this. Can you all hear, Sai, can everybody hear me well?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Excellent. And so here is the format. I will try to go through fairly quickly the presentation because I don't want to spend it's a reasonable size presentation, but it can easily be covered in 25-30 minutes. And then I'll choose to do that and then leave the rest of the time for discussions. So before I get into the presentation even, right, I think there are 2 broad ways by which my organization operates in Flipkart, right? One is driving business and product decisions. What product should be made? Is the product, are the features that are made working well? Are they improving consumer experiences, so on and so forth? That's one aspect which I would call measurement science. And the other is building a sort of intelligence that can be productized, which is the other aspect of it, right? I'll talk a little bit about both, and then we can get to the conversation thing. Can you see my presentation?
No, not yet.
Not yet? Okay, yeah. So this needs to, can you see it now?
No.
No? Okay, so let me see. Maybe it's not sharing yet. Okay. Okay, share screen. I'm choosing this and then I'm saying share.
Yep.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. So that's great. So we are all good. You can hear me, you can see me, and you can see the presentation. Okay. So let's start from there. Yeah. So I think what I'm going to talk about is analytics and data science for e-commerce. I'm going to go through 2 or 3 very small case studies. So there are tons of from where it came from, and we can go on and on about it. But the purpose here is to make it a little bit more interactive. right? So let's start with this. First, it's important to understand the scale of the business, right? Because at the end of the day, I think the real challenge in companies like Flipkart or any of these big internet companies is not so much what you build, but what you build to scale, right? So this is broadly the scale of Flipkart: 80 million products, 80 plus categories, 1 billion monthly visits. It's around 35 million, 30 million a day. 200, it's probably closer to 250 million registered users, and so on. So this is the scale. So that's about a quarter of, maybe not a quarter, 1/5, 1/6 of India or something like that. But that's the scale of the business. Yeah. First section, I'll talk a little bit about how do we use data analytics and data science to make strategic decisions. And then I'll go with the 1 or 2 use case studies. I'm looking at my watch here. It's around 8:10. So I'll try to close this by 8:35, 8:40 latest. And so leave time for 8:35, I'll target, leave time for questions. Yeah.
No problem.
So
take your time.
Yeah. So I'll go a little bit quickly through the exam use cases and so on, because the purpose here is to show the kind of work rather than go deeply into the use case. So pardon me if I don't go too deep into any of the use cases, but I'll try to cover them. Yeah. So first thing, right? So what does this organization do? What does strategic decision making at Flipkart mean? What does it mean from the perspective of data and technology, right? So there are I would say three kinds of things we do, right? Three broad kind of decision making constructs that are there. The most common one, this is very, very important, right? This is probably the most important. See, people, you hear a lot about machine learning and the last part, right? Data assisted machine decisions, so on and so forth. But if you look at it, this measurement science is the core to how any good internet scale company is run. And the beauty of these companies is you keep getting data, and so you can actually make very clear, thoughtful decisions as long as you have the measurement science built really well, right? So what does it mean? It means building statistical and ML driven frameworks to understand. So the way we build our entire business is around a hierarchy of metrics, right? So for example, I start with a strategy. Strategy may mean this year I'm going to focus on customer growth and customer experience, and maybe a little bit less on a few other dimensions, right? So which means my core L0 metric that I'm going to drive for the company is going to be maybe move my NPS from point A to point B, or move my customer growth metrics from point A to point B, increase my DAU, daily active users, monthly active users, so on and so forth. And that's what I'm going to target, right? So then that becomes my L0 metric. And then based on sort of a hierarchical framework, I build drivers for each one of these. So for example, if NPS was my North Star metric, then the drivers of that would be maybe delivery speed, maybe not having a breach of delivery, maybe product quality, maybe packaging quality, maybe customer service, so on and so forth. What this does is we build a hierarchical framework. So what are the L1 metrics that lead to this NPS L0 metric, and what are the relative importance? So we will build a model that will say that what is the relative importance of pricing versus speed versus XYZ for this particular cohort of customers, and so on. For each one of these, now speed is the next, speed of delivery is the next L1 metric to L0, the NPS L0. Then what drives speed, and so on and so forth, right? So if you think about it, we will build models that will hierarchically represent the entire company's business, all leading up to this North Star metric, let us say in this case is customer experience, right? So which means that no individual leader in the company has to worry about customer experience. They have to worry about their metric. If there is a logistics head, that person has to worry about delivery speed. In their team, one person may have to worry about how stressed their fulfillment centers are getting, or their warehouses are getting, so on and so forth. So there's a very clear hierarchy, and we will give them each layer of that hierarchy a metric. And if they all meet their metrics, what we guarantee based on these models is the NPS target will be met. So this is what is measurement science, one aspect of measurement science. The other aspect of measurement science, which is the product side of it, is whenever you roll out a feature, do you conduct the right kind of A/B measurement framework? So that I am able to exactly evaluate what is the incremental impact of that feature to the whatever North Star metric that is. If it's customer experience, I should be able to measure feature A. I should run A/B tests where I should be able to say feature A did this to customer experience, right? Again, that itself is a fairly complex science as well, right? Because in some cases, you cannot run a randomized A/B. For example, if you're trying to understand pricing, you cannot give different pricing to different customers, right? But you have to understand what is the impact of that in driving growth and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of sophisticated algorithms like they've used where you will build very similar cohorts, one given a treatment, another not given a treatment, and try to understand what are the impact of that, right? Somebody raised a hand. Do we answer questions during the process, or do we do it in the end?
No, please ignore that. I think
okay.
there's a lot of other chatter that keeps
Oh,
going.
okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So then there is data-assisted human decisions, which are typically operations. How do you run your operations? What is the strategic framework for building your speech strategy for the next year, so on and so forth. And then there are data-assisted machine decisions, which is obviously things, classic machine learning, fraud. It could be things like fraud detection. It could be personalization, recommendation. It could be understanding product quality and incorporating that into your discovery signal so that you have a model by which the best quality products surface to the consumer, so on and so forth, right? So these are the three kinds of things that the team works on, right? And obviously, there's a scale of data platform is huge. And you collect data through multiple sort of sources. You have a data platform, and there is a sort of ingestion from various source systems that happen. Then consumption pipelines are built, and the process data is used both in real time in product decisioning and or in offline in sort of building models and making offline decisions. Yeah. And experimentation is a very core part of the culture, and we run 50 plus launches every week. Each launch goes through a A/B experiment. We keep assessing impact. We have global holdouts and so on and so forth. And we do real-time analytics, dashboard monitoring of these things. Yeah. So this gives you a larger sort of a picture. I won't spend a whole lot of time. You can take a quick look at this. Various areas in which this team. So this team is a horizontal. This works with every aspect of the company. And basically it helps, it's the one horizontal which is sort of has a complete end-to-end view of the business. That's another big advantage where you can create sort of very, very good sort of ability to create strategic decisions because of this horizontal framework. Again, structurally, some companies have a very sort of, they don't have a centralized analytics and sciences org. They have them embedded in their various teams, and both have their pros and cons. But the biggest pro of this sort of structure is we see the business end to end. And so you can see many of the areas where we have understand product insights, understanding what products to build, what is the sort of how is it performing, so on and so forth. User insights, traffic insights, understanding whether we are providing value to our consumers, product assortment, selection. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Do we have the right kind of selection for our consumer base? How do you evaluate that? Supply chain, speed, optimization, service optimization, network optimization, so on and so forth, speech strategy, so on. Seller insights, understanding, onboarding the right kind of sellers, building the right experience, building trust, making sure the right quality of products are onboarded, and trust and safety, which is making sure that we have a sellers and buyers. We have to make sure that there is no fraudulent behavior that is happening in either of this two-party marketplace, and making sure that we detect any fraud as early as possible. Yeah. So I'm going to go into a couple of quick examples. First one is through One is about selection, assortment design. In retail, whether it's a brick and mortar retail or it's e-commerce, one thing that's very important is the kind of assortment you have, the product assortment that you carry in your property, right? So fundamentally, right, taking a step back, what do e-commerce consumers want? All they want are four things. See, they want to have a good user experience, finding, being able to browse and find the right kind of product, so on. Then they want pricing that works for them and a selection assortment that works for them, in the sense they are able to choose from a few different choices so that they feel like they are getting exactly what they want. So they should be able to, if they're looking for shirts, you can't give them one shirt, you have to have enough shirts so that they can look, pick and choose, and so on. And finally, once that is done, what is the post-order experience, right? If you're an e-commerce business, this is what we should be working on, right? So now what I'm going to talk about is a simple case of assortment design, right? What is the problem statement here? What is the width and depth of quality of assortment we need? Quality is a whole different topic. We do a lot of science around that, but I'm not going to talk about that in this particular talk. I'm going to talk about width and depth, right? What does width of assortment mean? What does depth of assortment mean? Just to get the definition first is width is the kind of different kinds of product lines you have. Do I have diapers? Do I have grocery? Do I have electronics? Do I have TV? Do I have some esoteric products that people look for? Do I have furniture? Blah, 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 right? That is width, right? I have a width, and that width is also hierarchical. Do I have enough width in overall what we call super categories, or within each super category, within fashion, do I have enough width in women's accessories, men's accessories, ethnic wear, blah, 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 so on. That's all width. What is depth? Depth is in a given unit of demand, right? We call that a market SKU. I'll talk about that. So for example, let's talk about, let's say Nike shoes for running within 2,000 to 3,000 rupees, right? That is a unit of, that's a demand. So that's what a consumer is looking for. In that, how much depth do I have? How much variety do I have within that one particular product line is selection depth. Because even within, if I'm looking for a Van Heusen dress shirt for formal white, I don't want to see just one of those, right? I want to see a variety. Maybe I want to see 2 or 3 brands. I want to see a variety, and within that, I want to be able to choose, right? And finally, quality, which I'm not going to talk about, but it's a huge, another field by itself in the kind of sciences we work on. In this talk, we'll first talk about width and then depth, okay? Width, right? Selection width, what does it mean, right? See, the first thing is everybody carries a lot of the what we call the head verticals. Head verticals are the most common that everybody needs to carry: shirt, pant, blah, blah, blah. A certain 3 or 4 of the big brands in shoes maybe carry Nike and Adidas and so on and that. So there is a basic head selection which everybody carries. Now the question is, how do you build the what you call the tail and torso and tail selection, which is the slightly less bought, but there is still a lot of demand for it, right? How do I build a product that can, on a sort of a scalable way, keep looking, understanding what are the gaps in demand, and keep making sure that that demand is available, right? So that's what this talks about, which is essentially, and we do this using search queries, right? We get around 15, 20 million search queries. We can also look at other Google or other search queries, what have you, but we use the search queries, and then using natural language processing would categorize that into a cluster of queries, right? Cluster meaning they all represent that particular unit of demand, right? And once you identify those, then you look at in those demands, what are being satisfied by our platform and what are not, right? And one good way to do is look at click-through rates, right? So if you find a set of clusters whose click-through rates are less than half of, I'm just giving you a random number. There's a little bit more sophisticated way of doing this, but I'm giving you the intuition behind this, right? Which is whose click-through rates are half of the rest of the mean of the cluster, then that means that somewhere there is a huge demand, there is a good demand for this, but it's not being satisfied, right? So then you identify these clusters, and then you build a seller intelligence portal where, based on a seller affinity score or a seller affinity model, you push these insights to various sellers saying that, hey, this is something people are looking for in our platform, and if you keep it, you may be able to sell it and grow your business. So that's essentially how an example of how width is built using data-driven products, right? Now, if you look at selection depth, and this is a little bit more complicated. This is essentially saying, so here I've given a few definitions, right? This is for the heads. I talked about tail and torso selection. This is for the head selection. This is for the selection where everybody carries, you need to carry a lot of variety. For example, a Nike shoe. People come here, Nike basketball shoe. They don't want to see one Nike basketball shoe. If somebody's looking for a Nike basketball shoe, I want to see enough variety there, and I want it to be in my platform, right? So here we define something called a market SKU, which is the most granular unit of demand, right? See, for example, if you're looking for a Nike basketball shoe, this is how a consumer looks for it. The consumer is not looking for more often than not, right? They're not looking for a particular shoe. They come in with a need which is saying Nike basketball shoe in the 2,000 to 2,500 price range. Then they start searching. So this is the core, this is the sort of the bottommost, I would say, unit of demand, okay? So this is the level at which I need to solve the product assortment problem, okay? So now the question, that is a market SKU. Then threshold is what is the minimum number of styles I need for that market SKU, which means how many types of Nike basketball shoe in the 2,000, 2,500 range do I need, right? This is the second question to be asked, right? So how do you determine this? This is another problem, right? So first, what we do, let me quickly go through it because I don't think the purpose is to go very deeply into it. But first, build a predictive model that can just forecast demand for Nike basketball shoe, right? It will be a function of a whole bunch of things, number of styles, discount, seasonality, product rating, blah, 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 bunch of things, right? There are hundreds of attributes that drive that, right? Then you build a model and you feel comfortable about your ability to build. So this was for a brand, Brown Loafers mass, right? There's an out of time prediction saying, hey, I'm able to predict sales really well, okay? Now what I do is, as I look at it, I improve selection. So I start plotting for increased number of sales, increased number of styles, how does the demand look? And typically what you will get is a S-shaped curve, right? You start building that, right? What it says essentially is if you have too few styles, the demand does not pick up. People don't buy. They don't feel like they have enough variety in this platform to actually make a choice and a decision to buy. At some level, that suddenly picks up. Usually these are S-shaped curves. And at some point you see that, okay, the number of styles, if you increase, in this case, beyond 11 or 12 styles of this brown loafers, suddenly people start considering this as a serious destination for this product and start buying. And at some level of choice, it becomes too much choice beyond which they don't care. You can have more, but they really don't care. For example, I could be looking for a Van Heusen full shirt formal. Maybe I want to see 5 or 6 types, but I don't care whether there are 3,000 types or 200 types or whatever. Somewhere between 10 types is more than enough for me. That's what this is, right? These are two different products. So this is how that is productized. So based on this, you again build what is the right selection, when is it too much selection, when is it too little selection, where do you need to add selection, so on, so on. Right? Another problem statement, another quick one, and then we'll just take questions, right? Another problem statement was, like we said, right, from during the purchase user experience. One of the key parts of the purchase user experience is having good reviews, right? So when I say good reviews, it is not reviews which say great things about the product. That's not what I mean by good reviews. We are a platform. We want people to have the choice to buy what product they want. Good review means reviews that describe the product as authentically and as detailed a manner as possible. Yeah. Older days, see, when earlier, before we built this algorithm, we just used upvotes as a sort of a measure of quality of reviews. What we realized is upvotes is not a very good sort of measure of quality of reviews. It says things like good product or waste of money or whatever, right? It's not very informative. It doesn't talk a lot about the product itself. And because 10 other found it, people found it to be good or found it to be a waste of money, they would just upvote it or downvote it and so on. So that's not very useful. So the problem statement is you need to have a product that is able to sort of review that is able to give you a lot of relevance about the product, talks about various product features, compares it with other products, so on and so forth. It should have a lot of depth. Maybe it should be structured, have pros and cons. It should mention experiences with the product and so on. And other things like it should not contradict itself. Reviews and ratings should you can't give a rating of 1 and say it's an amazing product and it served all these purposes, or you can't give it a rating of 5 and just ding the product and so on, right? So there should be some consistency there so that you know the authenticity of the review. So then we built a model. So rather than go through this, I'll go into what it does, right? So basically it extracts, goes to the catalog, extracts out vertical attributes of the product from the catalog, because the catalog will already have that product. And based on that, so this is for a phone, right? A mobile phone. It extracts out a cluster, seats, display, battery, capacity, warranty, camera, picture, so on and so forth. And then we use ML technique like called word to vec, where you also extend the seed list of the clusters. Picture it could be called image, pics, photo, IMG, photo, so on. Service could be logistics, shipment, delivery speed, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And so these could be some of the extensions of the seed list of cluster, right? And then you start extracting from the reviews text descriptions, right? Adjectives and so on of the cluster, right? For these clusters, right? Excellent in service, bad camera, or good Wi-Fi connectivity, blah, 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 so on and so forth, right? And then you start building for each of the theme clusters cluster phrases. So these are some examples, right? Picture quality, blur image, photo, optical image, good service, service center, great packaging, bring this, right? And then you start assigning weights for each one of these cluster phrases, right? And the weights are assigned by looking at the entire corpus of reviews for the product and seeing what is mentioned more, what do consumers talk about more. Based on that, you build a weight. And once you build that weight, you can actually, and then there are some few small nuances, right? You don't want product review talking about the same thing again and again. You don't want it talking 10 times about battery, but nothing else, right? Or so on, right? So then you give a DK for some of these things. If a product feature is being repeated again and again, you don't want to double count it. You give a DK function and so on and so forth. And similarly, things like pros and cons are things that you feel are good signals of a review. You sort of give them some additional weight. Yeah. So finally, based on that, you build this, and this is for a mixer juicer grinder, and you would start ranking reviews based on this quality. And what we do with that is, when you look at a product page, the reviews, the first 2 or 3 reviews you see on the right will be the ones that scored well. So which means that the reviews that you read will have a little bit more, be a little bit more relevant and so on and so forth. And with this, you're able to improve your units per visit, reviews per PPV's product page view, and so on and so forth. So you start building better conversions because people are finding more useful information, which will help them make decisions about the product. Yeah. So these were some of the things that I want to talk about. So my example use cases, like I mentioned, are over. I wanted to maybe spend a few. So one of the things I asked me to talk about was what are the skill sets in building a data team, an analytics team, and so on. So I'll talk for a few minutes about that, and maybe we can just make it more sort of interactive after that, right? See, I look at my team, if I look at 3 or 4 different personas, right? The first persona is the leader, right? And I'm just not talking just about myself, but my direct staff is also a set of leaders who manage large chunks of business, analytics for large chunks of business. So what do you need in these people, right? What you need is deep domain and business understanding, because this is a team that will work very closely with product leaders. This will be work very closely with business leaders and so on. So for this group, business and product understanding is very, very, very important. These guys should think like business leaders or product managers and so on and so forth. And that's the thinking. That's very important. Followed by the other really important thing is technical depth, because the team they are managing a technical team, and very often if you look at employee NPS, they rate their manager. One of the things that we have seen that they rate the manager very strongly is on their ability to provide technical depth and technical guidance. This third thing is very important to an analytics organization, particularly, is what I call quant intuition. It is different from, when I talked about technical depth, what I mean by technical depth here is not engineering, but more science, which is understanding statistics, machine learning, techniques, methodologies, so on and so forth. That's what I meant by technical depth. But the quant intuition is something very different, and which is probably among all of these things, right, I feel is one of the most important attributes of a leader in this field, which is having a very sharp understanding of what data means. What are the biases? Where could there be biases in data? What does this data really mean? That quant intuition is very crucial for any data leader. This is probably the most, I cannot understate it. This is something whenever I interview, I test a lot for, because that's, I think, a non-negotiable thing. And obviously then leadership, which is true for any leader, right? Ability to motivate people, train, be articulate, all of those things, take tough decisions, all of those things, right? Then the analyst. Analyst should be very sharp in business understanding, should have some technical depth as a user, maybe not, they don't read papers in machine learning, so on and so forth, but fundamentally have a good understanding of random forest or logistic regression or whatever, right? Some technical depth, understanding data, and quant intuition again is very important here. Then you have the scientist, right? These should be your top-notch technical talent, very deep understanding of machine learning, very deep understanding of building scalable systems, machine learning, and so on and so forth, and some business understanding, so that they look at data the right way, and they build the kind of models that create true tangible value once productized, right? And then the last one here, but a very important one actually, is the data analyst, data engineer. And the difference is data engineers are a little bit more on the engineering side, data analyst is more on the querying and working with large data sets. Both should be able to work with large data sets, but I don't expect an analyst to build consumption pipelines from data platforms, so on and so forth, more querying and so on. But broadly, these two with a lot of technical depth and practical hands-on experience. So this is what a team looks like. Now I'm done with my prepared part of the conversation. I don't know how you want to take it forward, Sai.
Well, absolutely. And then thank you so much for that. I think you've beautifully picked the most relatable use cases and walked us through each and every step, especially, after explaining the measurement. I've been making some notes, measurement science, and then data assisted human decisions, data assisted machine decisions, and then pick those two examples which are most relatable to all of us, and then went through those stages, right? Without, of course, getting into too much technical details. It's digestible, and it gives a glimpse into what goes on in making some of those decisions that as a consumer we trivialize, right? Or we probably ignore. And there is a lot of stuff that's going on. So there are several questions coming in. But before we get to that question, I think there's one important thing that I caught, and maybe I will want to get your perspective on that. So here you mentioned about, feature A does this, feature B doesn't do this. So there is always this this decision that need to be made by the teams. It could be a product manager or anybody to say, we want to build this feature because we believe that it can bring in this benefit, right? And that includes data, that includes data science. Now, the challenge that I've heard most of the people, and there are some challenges on getting those features approved, right? So for example, in your team, there is somebody who needs to make that decision whether yes or no, right? Now, what is the biggest challenge in getting such features approved, right? Before you answer that, I think it'll be good to take a poll from the audience to see what they think of this. Right. So, let's see what audience thinks in terms of what could be the biggest challenge in getting a particular data science feature approved. I'm sure many of them are in this situation, have gone through this situation at some point in time. So, and then you can give your point of view, how your organization deals with this. I'm assuming you are able to see the.
Yeah, I'm able to see that. I'm just looking at this lack of clarity, lack of tangible business revenue projection. Management team doesn't understand the nuance enough to appreciate the risks. Lack of confidence. Pull this off. Okay. So should I answer or what should I?
Please go ahead. I think I keep encouraging people to give their views and perspectives, but please go ahead.
As a data guy, this is fascinating to see. So part of my mind is trying to calculate what this is saying while I'm trying to answer this. So see, I think if you ask me, I will talk to you a little bit about Flipkart. Right? Flipkart is a very, very, very data and quant savvy and quant oriented company, right? So the last thing I would say is management team doesn't understand nuances of data science to appreciate the risk. I don't think that
that's not an issue for
I'm
you.
not seeing. I have not seen that as an issue for me. And for me, that's a very almost a deal breaker. So for me, I don't know how to deal with that because that's a more dealing. That's a different conversation.
Right, but imagine companies trying to set up the data organizations. And the top-down leadership just want to do it because it's the thing to do now, right?
Yes. See, that's a very difficult problem to solve. I don't know how you will solve it. The way I would solve it is I would try not to be in a company where that happens, right? To be honest, right? Because I think no, and I'm not. It's not even a joke. I'm very serious, right? I think it is very clear because if you are in today's world, if you're in a company that is fundamentally questioning or not understanding the value of data, then you have to question the likelihood of success for that company, actually, right? So some of the other things, how do you some of the other, can you go back to that thing?
So alternatively, your challenge in sense, your organization or your team.
So for us, the challenge is not even there was one on revenue impact and so on and so forth, right? Typically, we have always been able to figure out some way to build a proxy for the revenue impact, whether it is, right? So maybe it's a block on certain accounts, right? So we will build a model and figure out what is the incremental revenue. We call it the revenue breakage. What is the incremental revenue you lose by blocking this set of the possible fraudulent customer, and what is the sort of incremental benefit of that, because they will end up returning or breaking the product and giving it back, or taking a mobile and giving an old mobile and calling it a return. So these are this is an example. This is a data science product, right? So the ROI is fairly good because we're clear, because offline we'll model it, understand what the prediction and recall is, and based on that we will say, okay, this is likely to happen. This is so many is false positive. Based on that, I will make an estimate of what will be my revenue break, what is my revenue loss in the times where I blocked the wrong person, and what is and you'll be able to fairly well articulate that, right? Where the challenges often come are in prioritizing multiple of these things from a perspective of other ancillary impacts, right? So I will see there is something like called a sort of, some companies have this a global hold. See, I'll put a model and how long should I run this? Should I run this versus that? See, always what happens is there will become a plethora of choices, right? Of experiments you can run. Narrowing them to 2 or 3 choices that actually you can use resources to build is probably the biggest sort of challenge you would usually find, right? I think it is shrinking the various possible things to build to a small set of 2 or 3, which will be the most promising for this, is the biggest challenge we usually.
Okay. Super. So there are a few questions that are coming up, especially from Rohit Nagpal and Sumit Garg, and from Experience Flow, Mobi TV. I'm just calling them out so that we are acknowledging that they're asking these questions around metrics, right? And you beautifully explained the hierarchy of metrics, the North Star metrics, the level 0, level 1, level 2, and then the drivers, right? And how you rally the whole company to focus on their metrics so that your North Star metric gets optimized around that. Yeah. Now, how does one go about setting up and agreeing to these are the L0, L1, L2 metrics? What goes on in defining and agreeing to that? Because that seems like at a very leadership level conversation that
See, I think that's the other thing where we're very fortunate in Flipkart is, see, we have a very strong sort of voice in determining everything strategy downwards, right? So for example, if our CEO will have a set of top 20 OKRs, and we put a target, what is the metric and what is the target for each one of those, that becomes the North Star metric, right? For example, right? So this year, these are the top 3 priorities. The North Star metric is very easy.
It's from a strategy, and
it's a very strategy, right? For example, I want to sort of grow my, my focus is acquiring customers in the tier 3 plus cities, tier 2 plus cities. That's a North Star metric. That's very easy to measure. There's nothing, no rocket science.
Right.
That metric, right? How many customers did you have every month in that? Or my NPS should go up by 5 points, right? That's a North Star metric. So that's very easily done. So that's where we start, okay? That's a little bit top down, right? That's a little bit top down, okay? Once you have that, and then there is an iteration process. Once you have that, now we start building our models, right? These are statistical ML models, which will, we will dump all the things. And this is not something you do every year, right? We sat, see, after I joined Flipkart, I sat and we built this thing called a KPI tree, which is essentially building a robust statistical model for every major metric that exists in e-commerce, or many of the major metrics that exist in e-commerce, right? So if it is your North Star metric is growing tier 2 plus city consumer base, then you define what the target is, and then start building a model around what drives it. So for tier 2 plus, what's your penetration? What's your ability to serve? Do you have your logistics arms in these cities? That's a driver. What is the speed you can offer? What is the service level promise of speed you can offer? What are the kind of product? What is your selection? All of these become input drivers to that one metric, right? So then you start building a model. You start building a model of what is the relative importance of this. For example, for customer experience, we built a model, and what we realize is for certain cohort in the customer experience model, you're being your delivery speed. For example, a very seasoned e-commerce savvy consumer base, the speed of delivery is probably one of the most important drivers of customer experience. And this comes up, and then there are other things, right? For a new customer base in tier 2 plus, product quality is the most important driver of customer experience, because they lack trust in e-commerce because they have never shopped in e-commerce, right? So I'm just giving you one example, but these are large models with hundreds of attributes which are built, which will give you what is for every customer cohort for a North Star metric, what is the relative sort of importance of different metrics. And based on that, you build your sort of
so clearly the level of maturity of using this, building models, statistical models or whatever for every metric that you want to use to drive your North Star metrics in a data maturity organization like Flipkart is what you explained. But outside the context of Flipkart, let's say if somebody is trying to use data informed decisions, right? And they as you said, coming up with a North Star is a function of strategy, leadership decision, or whatever your business want to focus on in that particular year. Now, is it typically a top-down discussion with leaderships from all teams coming together and saying, here is the metric that we want to improve, which indirectly or directly improves the North Star metric? Is that typically the...
Yeah, see, it's like, that part is like any other company, right? There is some board guidance, there is a very small group of leaders who will sort of say that at the end of the day, we would come out with saying that this is the strategy for the company for the coming year. And based on that, the North Star metrics will automatically fall out. And one thing our CEO does every cycle beginning is he publishes his top. So based on those discussions, he publishes his top, say 10 or so OKRs. And that becomes the guiding principle for the company to build the North Star. And then we get on to building the sort of the metrics related to that and the targets related to that, and then start this process. Now to answer your earlier question, we spent almost a year, my entire team I joined Flipkart in around 2014 or so. I think around 2015, middle end or so, I started building this KPI tree, building causal models for everything. It took us almost 2 quarters. That was all my OKR was, building statistical and ML causal model for everything, right? Every company doesn't do this, or they may eventually do this, may not. But even before that, it's not like decisions were not data driven. But the same, L0 metrics always exist. Every company should have it. I don't think resources or anything should be an excuse for a company not having its North Star L0 metrics in this day and age. But from that L0 metrics, you can use more of a common sense kind of a thing, right? I don't need to build a very sophisticated, the kind of models I talked about, say for NPS, right? You kind of know in e-commerce, delivery speed is important. You kind of know that customer care is important. You kind of, so you look at those metrics and maybe build a simple regression to relate that to NPS and start figuring out how do you control these other input drivers.
Got it. That I think simplifies understanding of that. So there are several questions on the personas that you talked about, and we'll probably pick one question, and I'll try to include a few questions that are coming up, right? So you mentioned in terms of the personas, there is a leader, there is an analyst, there is a data analyst, there is a data scientist, and data engineer. So this is what I call them as typically data wizards team, right? And then there is a role, a person who plays this role which manages the people in the team, manages the projects that this team is working on, and interfaces with the business leadership team, right? Which you explained could be the analyst as a persona. But is there a, I don't know about what Flipkart, but what we've heard in the last few days and people this is called data science manager or manager of a data science team and products. It's not just managing people, which includes managing the data team, but more importantly, understanding the business impact outcomes, translating them into data projects, and vice versa, which is communicating the ROI, communicating the progress, and all of that. Is that role critical in Flipkart? Which and what do you call that title, if you will?
Absolutely, that role is critical, right? And we don't call it data science manager because in our company, when you call somebody a data scientist, that person is predominantly a scientist. Okay, and there is a very deep expectation of technical depth and literally publishing papers or reading a lot of papers, understanding state of the art, and that's the scientist function that we have defined. These could be two kinds in my team. One is the analytics manager, business analytics manager, and we call the other one is a TAM, right, which is a technical analytics manager. The technical analytics manager is a little bit more of a problem solver, a little bit deeper technically. The business business analytics manager is much more of sort of business partner plus a good understanding of analytics and so on, right? But the point that when I call a leader there, right? See, I personas, I didn't break it down to different levels. See, when I call a leader can be me, it can be my staff, or it can be the managers who are part of their staff and so on. Right? So,
but this role you're saying is critical. Now, you know, the reason why I brought that phrase is lots of companies seems to call some, you know, in fact, McKinsey calls it as very interesting data science translators. I'm not sure why that terminology, but lots of companies seems to add this title called data science managers, which is an interlock role here between the leadership team, business teams, and product team, as well as the data team.
So I'll tell you the role. In Flipkart, we are not big on titles, so I don't know what to call it, and I haven't given it any thought. What that role is, and that's a very important role in the company. And when I call the leader persona, that is kind of what I say, right? That the leader persona at my level, I interface with the rest of the leadership team in Flipkart. Then there's a leader persona at my next level, which interfaces with different business units leadership. And then there is the managers who interface with the rest of the thing. But the role is very much the same. It's a very deep understanding of the domain, at the same time being technically deep as well, because the deep domain understanding gains them the respect of the business or the product teams, and the deep technical understanding gets them the respect of their own teams, right?
Exactly.
So between this, then the point is, they should be able to talk business and product the way the product manager or the business manager talks that, and at the same time come back to their team and be able to translate that to a very critical role, and probably one of the most important.
I think that's exactly what we have heard from other leaders as well.
It's a very important role.
Very important. Great. I think, you know, in the interest of time, I want to acknowledge a few names that, you know, people have been asking questions. And if you later on, if you can find some time and if you can do that, you know, please use that thread to give quick responses to them.
Sure.
But Himansh, Mehul Kumar, Srini, Srivatsa, Bhupesh from Cummins, lots of interesting, you know, questions from different companies. But with that, let me just, you know, thank you again so much, Ravi.